So, will Trump be able to end the Russian-Ukrainian war, and whose team is he really playing on? This and other topics we'll discuss as usual right now with Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report, Rashkin News, Rashkin Report in English. Yuri, hello, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and happy Thanksgiving weekend to everybody who celebrates. It's a day where we can be grateful for many different things. It seems like Ukrainians are grateful as well for some changes.
Yes, my best wishes too, and I support all your words. And yes, we are very thankful to all people, all politicians, and all persons in the whole world who support
And all
our
the people
Ukrainian
of the
position.
world are thankful to Ukraine.
Yeah, yes, and we glory to Ukraine. Thanks everybody, and for viewing our and watching our interviews too. We are very thankful.
Very
The
grateful.
Trump administration is ready to recognize Crimea and other occupied territories of Ukraine as part of the Russian Federation in order to persuade the Kremlin to sign an agreement to end the war. It is with this proposal that Trump is sending his special envoy, again him, Steve Witkoff, and his own son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to Moscow, writes The Telegraph. A similar proposal to recognize Crimea as Russian has already been made by the Trump administration, I remember, on January 2025. But Putin is constantly short of everything, and we see it every day. Doesn't Trump understand that Putin needs the surrender of Ukraine, the restoration of the empire, and the fight against the entire hostile NATO?
Well, we live now with our cult of dear leader in the church of the great big deal that needs to be made on anything. Big deal is a good deal. A good deal is a big deal. It's a powerful philosophy that apparently simplifies a lot of things in life. So now when we see that United States is apparently willing to step over international precedent and history and everything else and bend over in order to please Vladimir Putin, well, we see once again that it's not going to work because it's failed before, and Putin seems to be as ever willing to sacrifice his own people in order to proceed with a violent war against Ukrainians. And at the same time, you kind of start to wonder, maybe that's not even the purpose. Maybe it's not about Ukraine. Maybe it's about the business deals and the opportunities that can be present for both Trump and for Putin, although Putin seems to be far beyond caring about money. But still, there's opportunities if only Putin could stop being Putin, which seems like a challenge for him because he's been Putin for a long time. And so he is going to more than likely continue being Putin instead of being somebody else and saying, oh, you know what? A sensible thing would be to stop this war with Ukraine, to get out of it. And so therefore, maybe this, since we know these characters are so predictable in both of their the decision-making process, so then maybe it's not even about the peace. Maybe this is about providing more pressure on Ukraine. Maybe this is about coordinating the efforts. And we see when Jared Kushner gets involved and things are getting serious for this administration. And we see that this administration has perfected the art of like a double dealing with, you have the official Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who is not, who's doing things like making loud statements that Ukraine is not going to get any security guarantees until there is peace, but that's about it. And the rest of it is done, the diplomacy is done by Witkoff and Kushner, who have no accountability before American people and just have accountability before their friend, Donald Trump, and close relative, Donald Trump. So that's who their allegiance is. And so I think it's just important to understand that when we see these people engaged in their negotiation process, this has nothing to do with what's better for the United States or for Ukraine. This is a personal deal that we get to observe some of it as Trump and Putin are trying to work things out. The problem for Trump is that Putin's refusing to quit Ukraine. And so he's giving him everything he can, only to show that Putin is not going to take it.
And we told every time, every hour interview that Steve Witkoff is like a Russian, pro-Russian man, Russian agent. So I think, Yuri, that's the story by Bloomberg about Steve Witkoff's renommee was not a big surprise to you. His recommendation how to speak with Trump to Putin, and I think that did Trump know about such style of communication and recommendation by Steve Witkoff to Putin? Maybe it's normal for both of them, or no, or it is only Steve Witkoff's strategy.
It certainly both. It seemed like this was a style that both of them are accustomed to. And
Ah.
we see that this is part of the reason that the leaking of the conversation between Witkoff and Ushakov and Dmitriev, those Russian vampires, didn't really go anywhere, because it turned out this is just how Trump administration functions. And the Russians are upset. Trump is not even really seems to, this is one of those important moments when we see just to what extent Trump is not susceptible to compromise. This idea that he can be blackmailed. Oh, we will let everybody know that these things are happening. Nah, he just doesn't see what he doesn't want to see. He calls it fake news, and reporters are stupid people for asking him questions about this. So I think that this is an interesting scandal which blew up in Russian and Ukrainian language space much more so than it did in English language space, because unfortunately, when Ukrainians are saying, and Russians are saying, and Europeans are saying, don't you see that this is going against your own principles? United States is going, what principles? We now have no scruples. We are now all about a deal, all about making a big deal and making a deal and making some money off of it, which only makes me think that when Trump is displeased with Ukraine not showing their gratitude, and then we see a story from CNN saying that at least 78 times Ukraine thanked the United States and President Trump, you start to wonder, maybe they're just not thanking Trump in the right way. Maybe this is not how he wishes to be thanked.
Like Taras Zagorodny, political strategist, told me this week, we, with humor, we should say 47 times thank you, Donald Trump, because he is 47th president of United States. 47 times a day, or sometimes an hour.
Yes, but if every time you said thank you, everybody also send him $1, he would like it even more. Because there's gratitude, and then there's gratitude, and I think we've just been speaking the wrong language here.
So we sent $1, not with these words, but due to program Pearl for weapon to Ukraine, United Nations, European countries, Ukraine sent Trump a very, very big amount of dollars every month. So I think that Trump should prefer this way of supporting Ukraine and Russian-Ukrainian war, because Pearl is money to Trump and to all businessmen considering weapons in the United States. And Trump should realize this moment.
If he were to be concerned about the economic state of Americans, he absolutely would. But he doesn't, as we see, based on his tariff and other economic policies. But I think you make an excellent point about the leverage that Ukraine has when it comes to using economic impact and the purchasing power of Europe or whoever. Because if we're going to be so appreciative to all the spending that we're getting from Saudi Arabia, Ukraine also is trying to spend money, but if we're going to be such crappy partners, looks like we're really not even really partners anymore, because even if Americans don't care, I think Ukrainians see pretty blatantly, as a result of this WITKOFFGATE scandal, that United States is definitely favoring Russia in this situation. Then maybe Ukraine should consider saying, you know what, this money can be spent elsewhere. we do have European allies that are not just allies in words, but actually are looking to help try and right now are doing the helping to Ukraine, not the United States that's doing it. So why not support Ukraine and actual partners instead of trying to persuade Donald Trump that Ukraine is worth supporting? I think that there's almost, it looks like a low self-esteem situation where Europe needs to be the one supporting Ukraine for its own safety, and the United States needs to be respecting Ukraine for the purchasing power that it provides. I mean, this is just seems like it's all wrong way to look at as was being presented to us. That needs to be kind of narrative needs to be shifted. And if the United States can't be a trustworthy partner to Ukraine, then who can it be a trustworthy partner to? This is where we're going to see that Ukraine can shift its resources. Europe is going to shift its resources. And then what is the United States going to do? It's this constant desire of exploit the existing world order. But once you decide to monetize the world order, and in such a suspicious way, then the world sees that you are no longer playing the part that you are assigned. Now, United States is no longer world cop or world leader or anything. We're like the world gangster, holding everybody up for ransom. And this is what Timothy Snyder refers to as the grifter's bubble. When they live inside this bubble for so long that they forget. And I think that these grifters that are in the White House now are forgetting that nobody needs them if they're not fulfilling certain functions. And what the United States is trying to do right now is have it both ways, have it sit on both chairs and being in charge of security and being respected in the world. And at the same time, frankly, being friends with Russia. You can't do that. Either you're going to be friends with Russia or you're going to be widely respected in this world. You choose.
What should we understand about Jared Kushner? Because we see this new person concerning Russian-Ukrainian war, and I had a conversation with Tzvi Zilber, Israeli journalist, and he told me that due to Jared Kushner, it could be possible to end, like Tzvi Zilber name it, and conflict on Middle East. Because Tzvi Zilber told me yesterday that they can agree that really war between Israel and Hamas and Jared Kushner played important role in this process.
Even though Jared Kushner does not lead Hamas, no, I mean Jared Kushner plays a very important role in the life of Donald Trump, and ever since the first term of Trump presidency, we've seen that every important task was assigned to Jared to be overseen, and Jared did his best. He found an economic advisor for Trump after searching on Amazon and finding a book with ideas that matched the crazy ideas of his father-in-law. So he's a wonderful matchmaker there, and it turned out, everything turned out to be quite lucrative for him. He's, I think, a billionaire now. In a way, I think, like just for comparison, if we look at, let's say, firing Jared Kushner and getting him out of there versus firing of Andrei Yermak and getting him out of Zelensky administration, we have two or both, or I guess Yermak just resigned, not fired, I'm sorry. And so imagine if Kushner resigned. We would be looking at people who, for many people, personify a certain kind of a important, crucial part, like a brain of a politician or a person, because if every important task I assign to person X and then person X goes away, then I'm going to look a little weaker. And because I'm going to be struggling, who do I trust now? Who do I find? And so Jared Kushner plays an incredibly important role in this administration, and we see him coming on at the end when it looks like things are close to being done. That's when we get rid of people like Kellogg, who were just there to make noise, and we bring in Jared Kushner to help poor Steve Witkoff, who doesn't have a clue of what's going on. So I think it looks like he's a kind of a closer for the family, and overall plays a surprisingly effective role. But now, to connect it back to Yermak, who is no longer part of the administration, it's a huge scandal that I think is remarkable how it's differently viewed in the United States versus Ukraine, because I think in Ukraine there's more of a celebration, and the United States, unless you're a Trump supporter, there's not celebration, there's more of a concern of what's going to be happening now. and to what extent Yermak was a person that was crucial to Zelensky's ability to make decisions, to function. He was always there with Zelensky. Actually, more so than we see with Jared Kushner. He was there always during the first cadence, but during the second cadence, they've distanced themselves a little bit. So I think it's the question of important advisors, and in the end, responsibility lies on the person in charge. The same way that in the end, Donald Trump is the one making the decision and having the responsibility for those decisions. Similarly with Zelensky.
Yuri, and how angry are Republican congressmen who think that Trump is betraying both Ukraine's and the United States' interest, and they say about it in public, Fitzpatrick and so on?
I think it is important because we gotta
Yes.
have Republicans who are going to stand up to this president. And first, it's going to be, and it's going to depend, as Chuck Schumer said, it's going to depend on popularity of this president. The less popular he is, the more Republicans are going to be willing to stand up to him. But we still see him maintaining way more support than he really deserves, because his base seems to be locked in at that low 30s percentage or mid 30s approval, and he seems to be solidly there. And he has a firm grip on the Republican Party, except for pedophilia. When it comes to pedophilia, the grip apparently loosens. But still, in spite of this almost blackmailing and the pressure campaign that is being applied to Ukraine, we see most Republicans very quiet, saying nothing. And that's why when you have one or two speaking out, you go, what? Was that a Republican? Everybody, bring a microphone. We have a Republican who is willing to speak up and speak up for common sense against whatever. This is remarkable. But it also highlights the different bases of support that we have within the administration, because we clearly are starting to have like a Vance wing with all of his connections outside, with financial connections with Peter Thiel, but also with his inside the government connections of his buddies, such as Dan Driscoll, Secretary of the Army, who is a very powerful, clearly has a very important role that he's playing right now in the negotiation capitulation process. But then we have the wing of Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, who on one hand is less powerful because he's not vice president. He can be fired as Secretary of State. He always has to be, one step ahead of the train here. But at the same time, Marco Rubio clearly has a base of support in Senate and House of Representatives. And that's where we see him contacting those senators and saying, this plan that is the 28-point plan is not an American plan. We got this from Russia, because that's who he can go to and get that message out through those people. And that's where we see one or two, a handful of senators. And yes, it is wonderful to see Congressman Fitzpatrick, and it's wonderful to see Congressman Bacon. But Congressman Bacon is also understanding the situation, and where the wind is blowing is not running for re-election. And your Republican Party, more than ever, needs more people like Don Bacon.
Yes, and it is really a problem. But Trump should also remember and think about the congressional elections next autumn, and all these topics and all these issues about his playing to Kremlin pool, as we see, it can destroy his ratings and his opinion of his electional supporting.
We have an interesting situation here, because on one hand, his ratings are cratering. He is losing support all over the place. But
Yes.
at the same time, it's never his fault, because he never takes responsibility or the blame. So
Yes.
who do we have to blame? We have to blame the Democrats. We have to blame the media. We have to blame congressional districts. We have to blame sick cows that came in from Mexico. And according to Secretary Bessent, and that's been part of the problem. Come on. Maybe sick cows are in the White House. And so this is where we need to look at the situation and understand that we have a president who is very concerned, because he sees the numbers are not good, but it's the fault of those other people that he's surrounded. He's surrounded by a bunch of losers, incompetent losers. Who hired them? Never mind. And so I think that he's going to do everything he can to try to change the districts for in the House of Representatives. We see that this is kind of going back and forth, but right now it's at best a draw for Republicans. They're not winning this. And if there's a truly tsunami blue wave, as is expected and likely to occur at this point, based on the polling numbers, I don't know what redistricting is ultimately going to save this party, I mean, Republican Party, that seems to be bereft without Donald Trump or with him, because they are voting against him. I mean, when have we seen an entire party, House of Representatives, Senate vote against the president near unanimously? That's a fail of historic proportions, which is important for President Trump, that this is a historic accomplishment of failure.
So I think, can there be impeachment for bad foreign policy to Donald Trump, or no? Or such a question cannot be trouble for him?
You know, it is an interesting question because anything is possible at this point. If we look at historic precedent, no, Trump is safe. He's going to be around, you know, and then he'll probably refuse to leave the White House because that's been the historical precedent. But if we look at what's really happening, can the impeachment occur? We already see that there's Republicans, handful of them, who are thinking about really leaving House of Representatives, retiring early, so as to give the majority already to Democrats. Essentially, they can begin impeachment process at that point. I don't think they will, but they might. But the process is not going to be complete until there's enough votes in the Senate. And it's hard to imagine that even if this president goes on stage and takes his pants off, that he will be impeached by this Senate. Well, again, pedophilia seems to be something where they cross the line. So I don't know if President taking down his pants will be sufficient or not sufficient. I mean, it's today's Republican Party. You know, it's a difficult situation. But after the elections, there's likely to be more Democrats. There's actually a possibility of Democrats taking over House of Representatives and Senate. And still, it's not likely to produce enough votes for impeachment unless, I don't know, if President all of a sudden gets into his Qatar plane and flies off to Russia. Like that, could he be impeached then? Yes. Could that occur? Considering that our president seems to be pushing our country towards Russia politically or even himself personally, I can't discount that possibility. I mean, we're having kinds of things that if you try to sell it to a Hollywood producer, they would not accept this as a likely scenario. I mean, the idea of Dan Driscoll being the main negotiator for the U.S. with Russians after having like a week of diplomatic experience, that's a comedy. That's a Hollywood comedy with like Adam Sandler or something. That's not reality, but yet it is. So who knows? Maybe impeachment is a possibility as well.
Strange times, really, we live in. Can we think about scenario that Donald Trump withdraw at all, walk away from the issue of Russian-Ukrainian war?
I think that's what Trump is trying to do since January 20th. He promised to his voters that that's what he's going to do, only he said that will lead to peace, because if U.S. is refusing to support Ukraine, Ukraine has no choice but to surrender to Russia, peace. And that's not how things play out. And this is where Donald Trump is struggling, because in the United States, in a similar situation, if his casino was losing money, he would have declared bankruptcy like he has 6 times. So he would just do it again. But in this situation, he can't seem to file bankruptcy and get out, although he is trying to do everything he can to shift the blame, to explain that this is Ukraine's fault, this is Europe's fault, not Putin so much, but all those other people, India, China's fault. It's horrible. But he can't seem to leave. And it's interesting because maybe this is because of the internal pressures that are occurring within the administration, or maybe this is happening because of the external pressures from Europeans who are saying that we don't believe in your ability to protect anything if you're going to walk away now. And yet Trump continuously failing, trying to blame others. And we have the same patterns that are occurring over and over with this person. So it's kind of predictable what he's going to try to do. Again, this is an important moment for Ukraine to look at and saying, do we want United States as a partner? This paradigm shift that is very difficult, because nobody says that you need to make United States into an enemy. But I think it's important to understand that the further Donald Trump is away from you, the better off you are. This is not an administration that's going to help Ukraine unless there's corruption involved, and unless there's self-dealing involved, and unless this is somehow helping Trump and Putin. We see how the things are shaping out time and time again. And it's just important to realize that these players are doing it because they think that they are impenetrable, that there's no consequences. They can do whatever they want. But they're also losing power all the time and influence. And we see this just as much in the fact that Ukraine continues to fight and, is really Putin is no closer to the win as he was when Trump came to power, as we see that Trump is losing and starting to look more like a lame duck here in Washington, D.C., in the United States. So these people, they're trying to be bullies, and they're trying to attack and go for this blitzkrieg. And when they fail, they blame others, and then they do what they do. But we have to just accept it and move on. I think that holding on to this, United States has always been, so it must always be, it's not reality that we live with anymore. Now, the next president of the United States, let's say it's a Democrat, let's say they go, oh goodness, I can't believe, we have so much, we're ashamed for what has happened during the past administration. We have to make it right. We have to pay reparations to the world for, how many people are dead because USAID stopped functioning? But that's going to be all a responsibility and accountability of the next president, because I hope that after this one, United States are going to go back to electing somebody with shame, with consciousness, with moral values, having seen somebody who lacks those and having gained new appreciation for those qualities. And it's going to be, right now, we most clearly see the failure of this administration when it comes to securing peace for Ukraine. The president said that he will need 24 hours to get it done. At this point, I think he failed about 300 times.
Yeah. Yes, really, it's a pity, but it's a fact. And maybe next president will not say that previous president is guilty on all process, all problems, all wars, and all accidents in the United States and in the whole world. Yuri,
And
thank you very much.
at the same time,
Yes.
I think it's unfortunate reality that we can't expect the next president, let's say a Democrat, to go farther than the Biden administration did. That's what's kind of, I think, is sometimes getting lost, is to what extent Biden's administration was an incredible opportunity to get things done. Because the next Democratic administration is going to look differently at being engaged in the world and about regime change. And I think that Democrats are fundamentally going to do not enough for Ukraine, but Republicans are doing nothing.
Yes, only all about sellings and about money and deals, but not confident, rare, clear peace deals. Yuri, thank you very much for this conversation. We have very hard but realistic topics. Thank you for your position and all your explanations. See you next week. Take care, please.
Thank you and take care.
Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rushkin Report in English and Rushkin News. My name is Irina Uzlova. Thank you for joining and watching us. See you later. Take care.